السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. Welcome to day 3 of the Zakat course. And for those who are newly joining us, they are the housekeeping rules. And for those who have been with us since yesterday or from day 1, then this is just a reminder for you people. Okay, so just as a reminder of what we've already done, the first thing we looked at in terms of the fiqh of zakat is the benefactor, regarding the benefactor, and that is the person who gives the zakat, yani who has to give the zakat. And these are the conditions, just as a reminder, because every time we are discussing the obligation of zakat, you have to have these conditions in mind. If the individual, is the voice not clear? Can't hear properly. Okay. Where is that? Okay, I'll just stop for a moment.
Up, or is the voice any clearer for everyone, or is the voice still breaking up? Just a moment. What if we use that? Yeah, the voice is good. Okay. Okay, so let me begin again. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa sallallahu ala khairi khalqihi wa sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Okay, so I was saying that as a reminder, the first thing we covered from the fiqh of zakat is in regards to the benefactor, and the benefactor has to fulfill these 5 conditions, and they are Islam, he has to be baligh or she, and he or she has to be sane, yani aqil, they have to be free, and they have to have complete ownership of the wealth that we are going to look at in the next slide. Okay, the wealth that the individual has to be in complete ownership of has to fulfill these 3 conditions, which we discussed yesterday. They have to have reached the nisab, they have to have haul, yani idha hala alayhi al-haul, if a year has passed upon it, and third, there has to be numu, yani they have to be capable, or they have to be growable in order for zakat to be obligatory upon them assets. Now, just to remind you one more time, the nisab, we looked at the gold and silver, and that is what we will use. The silver nisab is what we will use for all goods of trade. As for the year, we talked about the year, the beginning of the year, the first time a person becomes in the ownership of a nisab, that's when the year begins for that individual, whether it's the nisab of gold or silver or trade goods or livestock. Any one nisab, when the person becomes in ownership of that nisab, the year begins. In the middle of the year, if they own any other nisab, they will merge them together, and at the end of the year, they will have to give zakat on all of it. Thereafter, we looked at numu, and numu, we said growable. Growable is of two types. One is khilqi and one is fi'li. And we said khilqi is that which is naturally growable, and fi'li we said which is actively growable. So naturally growable or gold and silver and any other currency we have put in the category of naturally growable. I did mention that it is artificial money, and it not really haqiqatan, it is not naturally growable. It is in reality fi'li. However, we have put it in the category of naturally growable just for our understanding that currencies, we have to pay zakat on it, whether it's for trade or not, it is zakatable. Whether someone's given it to you as a gift, money as a gift, that money will be zakatable when it has reached the nisab. And the reason why I'm mentioning that it's not haqiqatan nami, yani growable, is because if a currency becomes dead, yani the currency has been cancelled or it's not there anymore, then there is no zakat on such invaluable currency. Whereas gold and silver is always going to be zakatable, because that's khilqi nami. So then we said fi'li, and in fi'li we said only those assets which are for trade purposes are regarded as nami, yani growable, yani actively growable. Any assets that are not trade goods, they are not regarded as growable, and therefore zakat is not wajib upon them. And the example I gave was the wedding dress of a female who is not gonna wear that dress anymore. She has made intention that I'm never gonna wear this dress again, and these designer shoes, and I'm never gonna wear them again. However, I'm gonna look after them and keep them due to their sentimental value, or because they are a memory for me, I'm going to keep it. Okay, so there's no use at all. In that case, it is not from the hajat asliya for that lady. That dress, those shoes, if she's never going to wear them, they are not from the initial needs, the hajat asliya. However, it is not zakatable as well, because it's not a trade good. And the reason why is because the condition of numu does not apply to it. And as I said yesterday, and I'll mention it again, that the reason why it cannot be regarded as a trade good if she intended to sell it on is because a trade good, an asset will only be classed as trade goods if the intention of trading is made at the time of purchasing that product or that asset. And because the wedding dress was bought for wearing on the wedding day, the intention is not for selling on at the time of purchasing it, and therefore it cannot become a trade good. And one of the rules of fiqh I mentioned to you yesterday was that when the amal is an action, then for that action to be regarded as legally occurred, intention and action both have to happen together. For example, I told you that traveling is an action, it's a fa'il, and with that fa'il, niyat is necessary. So when a person is sitting at home and with the niyat, amal is the action is necessary. So if someone is sitting at home and no matter how many times he makes or she makes intention of traveling, they will not be regarded as musafir, and safar will not have begun until with the intention the action occurs. Once the action and the intention are both combined, then it will be regarded as a journey, a safar, and the person will be regarded as a musafir. Now, when the person wants to abandon an act, to leave an act, then in that case, intention is not necessary. So for your understanding, if you understand two words, one is fa'il, yani ibtidaul fa'il, the beginning of the action, and the other is the end of an action, the abandoning of an action, then in the beginning of an action, intention is necessary. In abandoning an action, there is no need for intention. So if you have made intention and traveled, you have become a traveler. Once you have stopped in a place and you merely make the intention to stay there for more than 14 days, the journey ends. You are not a musafir anymore, because the action is not required for abandoning an action. Okay, the intention is not required for abandoning an action. Now, after someone has made intention of staying in a specific place, doing iqamah for more than 14 days, and they stay there for 2 days, and then they make the intention that I'm going to leave after 2 days. So in reality, they are not going to stay there for more than 14 days. Now, do they continue to pray their full namaz, or do they now pray their qasr salah? The answer is to begin an action, because the action of safar has been abandoned. Now to begin the action of safar again, to become a musafir with the intention, action is necessary. And therefore the person will not become a musafir until they leave. So they will continue to pray their full namaz, even though they have only stopped there for 5 days. They've stayed for 2 days, and then after 3 days they want to leave. It's only going to be 5 days, but mere intention will not make them a musafir again. Similarly, if you have a product or an asset at home and you did not buy it with the intention of selling on, then in that case it is not qabile numu, yani it is not growable. And then once you have bought it, after that, if you make the intention of selling it, you have made the intention that I'm going to sell this wedding dress or this book or this computer, I don't need anymore, I'm going to go and sell it. Even if you go and display it in the shop, you have not sold it, because trading is an action, and that action will not be regarded as occurred until the intention meets the action. So until it's not been sold, it will never be regarded as a trade good. Similarly, if someone has stock and they have decided that they are not going to sell it anymore, and it's not for sale anymore, and they are not going to sell it, then in that case, that is an abandonment of an action, and therefore mere intention is enough, and therefore that will not be zakatable. Okay, moving on. We have covered up to now section 1, section 2, and section 3. So today we will be looking at blockers and non-blockers. And if we have time, we will move on to section 5 and discuss the beneficiary. Okay, so section 4, blockers and non-blockers. Okay, so the first blocker that I have mentioned here is hajat-e asliya, which are the initial needs, which I have mentioned a few times before. What are the hajat-e asliya? Initial needs, if you look at the second bullet point there, it says initial needs are those assets which man, yani man includes woman, so men and women. Initial needs are those assets which man requires in life. These are such as houses to live in, clothing to wear, food and drink for consumption, housekeeping supplies, furniture, dishes, a car for transportation, or in fact, cars for transportation, a motorcycle, or in fact, that should not be there, motorcycles, bicycles, tools for professionals, and necessary books of intellectuals. The list goes on. Okay, anything a person needs for his personal use, they are regarded as hajat-e asliya. And this does not include the gold and silver, because gold and silver, that is naturally growable. Moving on, if you look at the first bullet point, it says assets that are zakatable must be in excess of initial needs. Because hajat-e asliya is a blocker, when we say it's a blocker of zakat, it means that zakat will only be payable if the assets that are zakatable are in excess of these initial needs. Okay, asbab. I have mentioned the word asbab, and I have not mentioned the word asbab. Okay, so one thing everyone should understand is there are two parts to tijara, for example. Tijara yani trade. One is the male tijara, yani malut tijara, and the other is the asbabut tijara. Asbab is the plural of sabab, and sabab means a means or machinery, equipment. Anything that can be a medium is regarded a sabab. So asbab is its plural, and mal is the actual currency that you use for trading. So amwalut tijara and asbabut tijara are two different things. Amwalut tijara, or what you will pay zakat on, that is zakatable, the amwalut tijara, and that includes the trade goods and the currencies. That's what you are trading with, the two things that you trade with. As for the asbab, they are the means of trade. They are machinery, equipment, things like that, tools. They are not classed, they are classed as initial needs and not classed as zakatable. And this is why we say that when you are renting properties out, that property or those properties, they become the asbab of tijara. They are the asbab of your trade, and the amwal of your trade is the nafa that you are giving to them. Yani they are only receiving, they are becoming owners of the benefit from that property, but not the actual property. So the tijara there, so in that case, the house or the property that you are renting out, that property is from amongst the asbab, the means of trade, and the rental income that you receive, that will be the zakatable, because that is the amwalut tijara. Okay, so amwalut tijara is zakatable, asbabut tijara is not zakatable, and that's what that point there is for, that asbab of trade are classed as initial needs because they are known as hajate asliya. One will not be forced to sell his asbab of tijara in order for him to become ghani. Yani what I'm saying is, if someone becomes in need, someone becomes a needy person, and zakat is not obligatory upon them to give, they are not benefactors of zakat, and they are asking whether they become beneficiaries of zakat or not, but they have asbab of trade. Will they be forced to sell their asbab of trade before taking zakat? The answer is no, because asbab of trade are classed as initial needs, hajat asliya. Islamic books are an initial need. They are regarded from amongst the haja asliya for the ulama kiram, and similarly medical books for a medical doctor. Okay, if there is an individual who is not an alim of the deen and he has books that are for the ulama, then those books are not hajate asliya for that individual, because he is not an alim or she is not an alima. Them books are not hajate asliya, but that does not mean they are zakatable. They don't have to pay zakat on it, because zakat will only have to be paid on that if it is growable. And as we said, growable is only that which is a trade good, and that cannot become a trade good unless someone has a bookshop and they are buying and selling books, and the intention they bought the book for was to sell on. Only in that case a book will be regarded as zakatable. Otherwise, if it was bought for one's personal use, then it will not be zakatable. However, it is apart from the initial need. It is not from the hajat asliya. Similarly, a medical doctor, for him to have books on medication or any others that are related to his profession, they are regarded as his hajat asliya. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because if someone becomes poor, but they have books which are not from amongst their hajat asliya, the person's not a doctor, but he's got books worth thousands of pounds that are related to medication or being a doctor, then he will not be permitted to take zakat. He will have to sell them books and become wealthy himself. Okay, so that's the reason why we mention it. So they are not zakatable for a non-doctor, a non-medical doctor. However, they are not, at the same time, they are not from his hajat asliya. Okay, for a tradesman, any item that leaves an effect on his merchandise that will go with his customer is not from initial needs, such as the ink for printing and dye for color and mats in cars and bottles for perfume and itr. So if there's an attar perfume seller and he's purchased a lot of empty bottles, then them bottles are zakatable, because he's trading in itr. He's not trading in bottles, he's trading in itr. The main purpose is itr, the perfume. However, those bottles go with the itr to the customer, and therefore they will also be zakatable. Similarly, if someone buys and sells cars, someone has a car showroom, then the mats that they will place in the cars when they give them to customers, if they bought loads of mats, car mats, and they give them to the customers in the cars, and they sell them, they furnish the cars with the mats, then in that case, those mats are also zakatable. Okay. Moving on to the next bullet point, it says, if a physical effect will not remain, such as soap. Okay, so I've not used full sentences here, just as a reminder for me. If someone has bought lots of soap or cleaning products in order to clean the products that they are selling to the customers, that soap does not remain anymore. Okay, so that is not zakatable. So if they've got stocks of soap and cleaning goods, they don't have to pay zakat on that. Similarly, if somebody's selling food and they are using salt in the food, that salt dissolves and then it becomes kal adm, yani as though it's not there physically in terms of a tangible existence. Yes, it's still there in taste, but it's not there in a physical form. And that's why salt is also being regarded as not zakatable. In this case, it is regarded as an initial need for the business. Okay, moving on to the next one. Books that are not one's profession, that are not related to one's profession, are not initial needs, but at the same time they are not zakatable, such as scholarly books for a non-scholar, and that's what I was talking about a moment ago. A Quran, an interesting rule, I've added this on just for your interest, is that a Quran is an initial need for a person who is not a Hafiz, but more than one is not. Okay, so if someone has more than one Quran, then that second Quran is not from the Hajat Asliya. As for a Hafiz of the Quran, then any Quran is not an initial need, because he is a Hafiz, he already has the Quran in his heart and mind. Therefore, any book form of the Quran is not from the Hajat Asliya for him. The last one. Yeah. Just to make sure, we're just taking a question here from Rashida. Just to make sure, let's say you are buying products such as books to sell them. You'll not pay zakat on these books as long as it is not sold. You will pay zakat on the money you get for selling. Okay, that's not correct. Okay, the answer is that they are trade goods, and then books, zakat will have to be paid on them. Okay, so just to make it absolutely clear, any assets that have been bought with the intention of trading for selling on and solely for that reason, they are zakatable. Okay, the only time books are not zakatable is if they have not been bought, purchased to sell on. So if someone is doing a business selling books, whether it's online or in a shop, physical shop, the books that they have bought for trading and they have in stock, they will have to do a stock take, and they will have to pay zakat on all of their stock. At the same time, any income that they have generated from their sales, they will also have to pay zakat on that as well. Okay, so it's the stocks and the income received for those that have been sold. Those books that have been sold, you don't have to pay zakat on them. You don't have them anymore. It's that money that you've received in exchange for them that you have to pay zakat on. If you've gifted some of the books away to someone, again, you don't have to pay that zakat. You have to see what you have. You have to pay zakat on that. What you don't have, you don't have to pay zakat on. Okay, and the only time, again, I'll clearly mention, the only time it could be any form of goods that are being sold regularly in the markets, but they are not trade goods for you. If you have not bought them at the time of purchasing them, your intention was not solely and only to sell on. And we looked at an example yesterday. If someone, for example, buys a watch, and the intention is that I will sell it on. That's the sole purpose I'm buying it for. I am going to sell it on. I'm never going to wear it. I'm just going to buy, put it in my showroom, sell it on. That watch is zakatable. But if the intention is mixed, I may wear, well, I may wear it, use it, and if I get a good offer, I will sell it, or I will definitely sell it, but I will wear it as well. I will use it whilst I've got it, and then I will sell it as well. Then in that case, it is not zakatable, because the intention was not solely and only to sell on at the time of purchasing. Similarly, if you buy a house or land, and that land or that house, your intention is, I may build on it, or I may live in this house, I may rent it out, or I may sell it on. And this land, I may build my own house on it, or I may sell it on. Because the intention is mixed, there is no clear intention, therefore it will not be zakatable. Okay, so that's hajat asliya. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is the next blocker that we are looking at. This is dain, debt. Zakatable assets must be free from debts. And when we're saying blockers, what we mean by blockers, we'll talk about that I think in the next slide. A blocker means that will be taken into account. Yani it will be deducted from the total zakatable assets. Okay, so if someone is in debt, then that will be deducted from their total assets, from their total zakatable assets. So it says here, zakatable assets must be free from debts. Then it says a debt is also a blocker for a guarantor of the debtor. Okay, so if someone has, okay, there's an example there. So let's read the example. It says, if Zaid took a loan from Bakr and Amr became the guarantor for Zaid, then this debt will be a blocker for Zaid and for Amr. Because in Islam, Bakr has the right to demand the debt from either of the two, and either of the two is liable to pay according to Islamic law. Here, recourse is only allowed in certain circumstances, and recourse is when the creditor will demand the debt be paid by the guarantor. But in Islamic law, the creditor has the right to demand the debt from the debtor or the guarantor. And that's why the Hanafi Fuqaha Kiram have said that the debt will be a blocker not only for the debtor but also for the guarantor. The next point says that the debt is only a blocker if it is from before the distribution of zakat became obligatory. So if you remember, yesterday we talked about the nafse wujub and the wujub ada, the initial obligation and the obligation to distribute. What we're saying here is that the debt is only a blocker if it is from before the distribution of zakat became obligatory. Yani when someone's 1 whole year had passed and zakat was due, yani the obligation to distribute had occurred, and after that someone became in debt, someone became a debtor, then that debt will not be a blocker because their zakat was already due from before. That's what we're saying. Okay, so if we read that again, it says the debt is only a blocker if it is from before the distribution of zakat became obligatory. If a year had passed and distribution became due, and then the person took a loan out, this loan will not be a blocker for that previous distribution. And when we say distribution, it means the discharge of the zakat, dispense of zakat, and so on. Okay, continuing the topic of debt, it says the money accumulated for Hajj, Sadaqah-e-Fitr, Kafara, and even the money owed to the wife as a deferred dowry are non-blockers. Okay, it's not considered as a debt. You have accumulated money, saved money for Hajj to go out on the pilgrimage of Hajj. That's not a debt. Sadaqah-e-Fitr, Kafara, they may be due upon you, but they are not regarded as those debts which will be blockers in zakat, because there are 3 types of debts. And I was going to make a slide on this, but I thought I'll just speak it out to you. There are three types of debts. One is known as a dayn qawi, and one is known as a dayn mutawassit, and the third is known as a dayn da'if. And dayn qawi means a strong debt, and that is a debt that you have to pay. You have to pay. There is no way out. And a dayn mutawassit, and it's for both, for the giver, for the creditor and the debtor. So the creditor, he knows he will receive it back. That's a dayn qawi for him. A mutawassit dayn is that dayn which the creditor has overwhelming certainty that he will receive it back. These type of debts are blockers for the debtor, and they are non-blockers for the creditor. So the creditor will have to pay zakat on such debts when he's loaned money out to people. As for the third one, which is a dayn da'if, which is a weak debt, that is when the creditor does not even have overwhelming certainty that he will receive his debt back. And in some cases, it is a blocker, and in some cases, it is not. And that's what we are looking at here. The money for the mahar for a wife, the dowry for a wife, there are two types of dowries given to a woman. One is a dayn mu'ajjal with an ayn, mu'ajjal, and the other is dayn mu'ajjal with a hamza. And that is also known as a dayn mutaakhir. So the mu'ajjal is the one that is given immediately at the time of nikah, before consummation of marriage. Dayn mu'ajjal has no fixed time. And the fuqaha kiram say the fixed time, there is no fixed time, but it does become due if the wife passes away, or if talaq occurs. If talaq has been given, then now it's become due. Such a dowry, even if it's thousands of pounds, if somebody did nikah with a woman and the dowry she demanded was, let's say, £50,000, and it was mu'ajjal. Mu'ajjal means there was no fixed time for it. It was there's a fixed time, and that fixed time is in reality when she passes away or talaq happens. That's what we call a deferred dowry. So that dowry of £50,000, she will not have to give zakat on that, and neither will he have to give. Neither does he account for it as a debt. Yani it's not a blocker for him. Okay, that's what we're saying. Moving on to the next one. It says mortgages and student loans are classed as debts by some scholars and not by some scholars. It is safe to only class the amount immediately due as a blocker, and that which is not due as a non-blocker. Okay, and I do know that mortgages, student loans are quite pressing matters when the month of Ramadan comes. People want to know about zakat, and it doesn't make sense why it's always in Ramadan, because the year, and we've already looked at the hawlane hawl, when zakat becomes due, and we should all, those who have been listening from the last 2 days, they should all now realize that Ramzan has no relevance to zakat. Yani there's no relation of zakat and Ramzan in terms of delivery of zakat or distribution of zakat. Okay, so mortgages and student loans are debts. In the Hanafi madhab, they are liabilities, they are debts, and they are regarded as blockers. And the reason why that is because in Islamic law, any debt which is from amongst the dayn qawi and dayn mutawassit, the moderate and the strong debts, and mortgages and student loans are classed in Islamic Sharia as dayn mutawassit and dayn qawi. Yani they will be regarded as blockers. And in Islamic law, the rule is that a creditor has the right to demand the debt from the debtor whenever he wants, even if he has agreed a certain period of time, even if he has written it and signed it that I will not demand it until so and so, or you will only be liable to pay after so many years. No matter how many written agreements and no matter how many signatures he does, and whether he passes it by the court, etc. In Islamic law, the creditor still has the right to demand immediately. And for that reason, in the Hanafi madhab, all debts are regarded as immediate, and the difference between a fixed term and immediate debt is not considered in the initial Hanafi madhab. It is only considered for the dowry, the deferred dowry for a female. Other than that, every debt is regarded as immediate in Islamic law. However, we know, living in the UK or wherever else you are living, based on the law of your land, you know that the banks do not have a right, according to the law of the land, to demand all that sum immediately. Similarly, students clearly know that some of them may never even have to pay that loan. And for that reason, my advice is that we should still pay our zakat, even if we have mortgages and student loans. We should only deduct that which is immediately due. Okay, so if your monthly payment is due, then you should deduct it and regard it as a blocker. If it is not due, then you should not regard it as a blocker. As for the fatwa in the Hanafi madhab, the fatwa is all debts are blockers. Okay, moving on. It says here, any other current liabilities and dues. And what that means is any bills that need to be paid, they will also be blockers. Future liabilities and anticipated liabilities are non-blockers. Okay, they are not blockers. So if someone has anticipated liabilities, even if they are unanticipated or anticipated. So unanticipated, what I mean by that is when someone has reserves in case of any unanticipated reserves liabilities, they are not blockers. They will have to give zakat on them. Okay, so if someone, for example, wants to continue the flow of their business and they have placed some of their trade goods stock in unanticipated reserves, just in case something happens due to on the supply demand chain and my business continues to flow, then they will still be zakatable. Them reserves, they are not blockers. Says the rule regarding zakat in the presence of blockers is that the net worth of the benefactor's assets is zakatable. And what I mean here by net worth, this means the excess of zakatable assets over the blockers. Okay, so what someone will do is they will calculate the total value of all their zakatable assets and then all their blockers, and they will minus their blockers from their zakatable assets. That's what I mean by the net worth of the benefactor's assets, yani the excess of zakatable assets over the blockers. Okay, so if somebody calculates all their bills and all their debts, all their liabilities, current liabilities, not future liabilities, they've calculated all of them and they come up to, let's say, £30,000. And then they calculate the gold, silver. Remember, if your wife has gold in her ownership, you do not calculate that in your zakat. That's hers. She has a separate obligation of doing her own zakat. So for you, if you have any gold bars sitting in one of your banks, or any silver, you have any trade goods, grazing livestock, you will calculate the total of all of them. And if that total comes to, for example, £50,000, then you will minus your total of current liabilities, which was 30, and you will have to pay zakat on £20,000. Okay, that's what we're saying. So if you read them last 2 points again, it says the rule regarding zakat in the presence of blockers is that the net worth of the benefactor's assets is zakatable. This means the excess of zakatable assets over the blockers. Okay, and that brings us to the slide that maybe many of you have been waiting to see. And I've just randomly put these terms on this list. So they've not been carefully thought of. I've just put them on as I have thought of them. Okay, so just for your for you guys to observe. You can have a look at that. I'll point out some of the things because I have repeated them on both sides. For example, I have repeated horses, donkeys, and mules. Okay, if you can. Where's Wally? If someone can find it on both the lists. Horses, donkeys, mules, they are present on both. And the reason why, and I'm sure one of you can probably work that out, is that horses, donkeys, and mules, if they are purchased for trading, someone buys and sells them, then they are zakatable. And horses, donkeys, and mules, if they are not for trading, then they are not zakatable. That's why I put that there on purpose, to just give you the idea that there are many things which can potentially be on both lists, and the intention at the time of purchasing will determine whether it should be for you, for an individual person, be zakatable or not zakatable. Okay, so I'll point out some of the important ones that may need some information. Bonds, they are zakatable. If someone has bonds, then they have to pay zakat on the value of them. Safety stock. Okay, safety stock is, again, that unanticipated reserves type of thing that I mentioned. Bitcoin and shares. These two are classed as illegal in Islamic law to trade in. The Bareli Sharif seminar ruled Bitcoin as not recognized as an Islamic type of transaction, and therefore Bitcoin is a bay-e fasid, yani it's an invalid transaction. So the money someone has invested in Bitcoin, the rule is that they should take their money out, they should cash their Bitcoins in, and they have to pay zakat on what they would receive. That which they would receive is going to be halal for them. So something being haram, or a type of bay being haram, and the benefit received from it being halal or haram are two different things. Okay, so although trading in Bitcoin is ruled as impermissible, the benefit one receives is halal for him to take, and therefore he will have to give zakat on that. So the rule is that if you have any Bitcoins, then you will pay zakat on them. The zakat will become due on it, yani nafs wujub is present at that time. However, wujub ada, the distribution, the obligation to distribute, will only be once the person cashes in. He will have to backdate his zakat. Okay, same thing with shares. The share market has been ruled as impermissible by the Shari Council of India, the Mufti Kiram, due to the separation of preference shares and non-preference shares, and the involvement of interest, and also the involvement of risk. And the scholars there regarded the share market as a higher chance of losing your money than benefiting from it. And therefore, they did rule that the share market is not permissible to trade in. And therefore, if anybody has any investments in there, then the rule again is the same. The value of what they have will be zakatable, and it will be due once they have taken their money out. Okay. Pensions. Yeah, in Islamic Sharia law, after a lot of deliberation with other ulama kiram, it has now become clear to me that all pensions that are taken from one's salary, whether the person has a right to cancel that pension or not and take their money back, or whether the person has a right to influence where that pension is invested, all pensions of such that are taken from salary are zakatable. However, the wujub ada, yani the obligation to distribute zakat from that, will only be due after receiving that pension. And in order to keep yourself free from confusion and difficulty, good practice is to give the zakat every year. and it's not difficult. You just have to ring your HR department or the company that holds your pension and ask them at the end of your year or what date you have to, when wujube ada for your normal other nisabs will be, you ask them what date, on that date, how much of my pension from my salary will have been taken, and that is the amount you have to give zakat on. Any add-ons from the company or your workplace, they are not zakatable until you actually receive them. Okay, so yes, it may be difficult for some people to work out, but you would have to do that. Deposit. The word deposit is mentioned in zakatable, and that deposit is for something you have maybe rented. If you have rented something, you are renting a house and you have paid a deposit of a month's rent up front, or maybe more than a month's rent up front, then that is zakatable for you. You've paid the deposit, you've got to pay the zakat on it, not the landlord. Okay, because it's you own that money, and it's like a debt. It's like a loan you have given to the landlord. Company finances. This is an important one where people say that that's the company's, that's not mine. Okay, the company owns that much money, not me. After a lot of deliberation in a seminar, the ulama kiram judged or decreed that company finances are actually in the ownership of the shareholders, and each individual shareholder will have to calculate how much of the company finances is in his share, and he will have to pay zakat on them. Okay, specific life insurances, and the reason why I've said that is because in some of them, once you have paid for the life insurance, you never see that money back. It's gone. But specific life insurances, like some of the ones that are government based in order to help people, is they take your money and they give you all of it back when you want it, or after you pass away. There's a certain period of time you will pay life insurance, like there used to be a Britannica life insurance. They would pay for a certain amount of years. After that, they would give all of it back. That is all zakatable. It's your money. And loss reserves is similar to the safety stock. Okay, if someone in a company has set aside reserves, they are zakatable. Okay, non-zakatable, most of them are hajat-e asliya, cars are from amongst the initial needs, whether it's one car or more than one car. If someone's using them cars, they are not zakatable. They are regarded as hajat-e asliya. Okay, in non-zakatable, I have mentioned collateral. And by collateral, what I mean is that which you have left in security for a loan or debt, or a payment that you need to make. I have added specifically wedding dress and designer shoes because I have had this question many a times. People asking, I have to pay zakat on my wedding dress. People asking, I have to pay zakat on my on my designer shoes. The answer is no, you don't have to pay zakat on designer shoes. No matter how expensive someone's shoes are, if they are being worn, or they will be worn, or they will not be worn, they are not zakatable. The only time they are zakatable shoes are when they are actively growable, which means that they are for trading. They were bought solely for the purpose of selling on, and the intention has not changed. Any haram assets are non-zakatable. If you have any haram assets, then immediately they should be returned to the rightful owner. It does not belong to you for you to give zakat on it. It is obligatory upon you to return it to the rightful owner, and you have to exhaust yourself to find the rightful owner of that haram asset, whether it's £20 or £5 or £1, or it's thousands of pounds. Okay, You have to find the rightful owner, give it back to them. If it belongs to the queen, you should give it back to the queen. If you cannot find the rightful owner, then in that case, you should immediately distribute it to the poor without the intention of any reward. The intention should solely be, may Allah forgive me. Okay, not that I am benefiting the poor or I am doing a favor for the poor, that Allah will reward me for this. No. Haram assets have to be given to the poor as though the poor are doing you a favor. Okay. That's the end of the section on assets or blockers and non-blockers. If there is any questions on this, then please ask now, or I shall move on to the next section.
A few questions.
If I take out a loan of £10,000 from a bank and purchased tradable goods, say car, mat, to sell, does that cancel each zakatable? Yes, that's correct. The trade goods will be zakatable and the loan will not be zakatable, the loan money. So you will work out the net worth. Okay, so yes, you have the right idea there.
I think you've already answered that. But
If I have saved money, for example, £10,000 in cash with the intention of buying a house, is that money zakatable? If you are immediately in need of a place of stay and you don't have any place of stay, then in that case, you will not pay zakat on it. Yani it is immediately needed. If it is not immediately needed and you have got a place to stay at that moment, then all that money will be zakatable. That money will still be zakatable. Okay, can you pay zakat in advance? We talked about that yesterday, that yes, you can pay zakat in advance. And we gave the example of someone waking up in the morning, praying his Fajr, Zahar, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and saying, I'm free for the day. I prayed all my namaz. You can't do that in namaz. You can't pray your namaz in advance. However, with zakat, we have the freedom of paying our zakat in advance, up to the extent you can pay more this year and have it rolled over for the next year. I don't understand that part where it says with interest of a shareholders in a company. I don't understand that question. For the mortgage due, you mentioned deduct what is immediately due and still pay zakat. What do you mean by immediately in terms of timing? Is it that which is due in the next month, 6 months, or 1 year? Immediately due means right now. Okay, so if your mortgage or debt or loan payments are due, for example, at the beginning of every month and you've not paid it, then today your due for the 1st of April is still immediately due, not in the future. Okay, so immediately due means right now. It is at this moment. In British law, I think, or in finances terminology, I'm not sure, someone else may be able to help us, but when they say current liabilities, it means from today within 1 year. But in Islamic law, what we mean is immediately, right now, it is due. Do I pay zakat on the money that I have already given to Hajj agent for Hajj that is going ahead later on the year? The money that you have already given to an agent is still your money. It is still zakatable until you have actually gone for Hajj. If a child becomes baligh and money is kept in child trust fund, I presume it becomes zakatable. We've already answered this question. Not only answered it, we studied the conditions of the benefactor. The benefactor has to be baligh, and therefore children who are not baligh, they do not have to give zakat. Once they do become baligh, then money sitting in their child trust fund, they will have to give zakat on that. Okay, so if they are not baligh, they don't have to give zakat. Even if a child has £1 billion, he is a billionaire, but he is nabaligh, he does not have to give zakat, even if his parents are fuqara. But that child is a billionaire. That child does not have to give zakat, neither does the parent have to give zakat on behalf of his child. Because until he doesn't become baligh, he is not a benefactor of zakat. Okay? Any more?
Carry on.
Okay, yeah, mortgage again. There's another question on mortgage. Mortgages, as I told you, best practice is to just give zakat and not class a mortgage as a blocker. One should only deduct that which is immediately due. Okay?
Rented house, rented car.
Rented house or rented car. Yeah, if you just have to look back onto the conditions of the benefactor. The fifth condition we looked at was milke tam. You have to have complete ownership of it. When you are renting a car, yani a leased car, for example, or a rental car, or a home that is rented, that is not in your complete ownership. You only own benefit, nafa, of that house, and you only own the nafa of that car. It's not in your ownership, so it's not zakatable. Zakat is not due on you for that asset. Okay. I have a property I give to rent. The rent money is not saved but spent. So do you still have to pay zakat on the amount I have received from rent? No. If you are running a business, the trade goods that come in and go, you don't have to account for the whole year, how many came in, how many went out. No, you only look at the end of the year. What do you have right now? Similarly, rental income, you don't have to work out how much you received throughout the year. You only have to see how much you have left at this moment at the end of the year. Okay, so we only give zakat on what we own, and it is zakatable at that time when zakat becomes due. What you've spent, or you've thrown it away, you've given it to somebody else, you don't have to give zakat on that because you don't have it anymore. It's not in your ownership. That's the reason why the condition of complete ownership is there. Okay, so that rental income you received 4 months ago, are you in complete ownership of it? No, I've spent it. So then you are not the benefactor of that asset. Okay.
Bitcoin question.
What's the question about Bitcoin? The actual investment of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is haram, but anything we have earned up till this point is halal if we didn't know. Whether you know or you don't know, the benefit from it is halal. However, the act is not halal. Okay, so the act of investment in Bitcoin is forbidden, but what you receive in benefit from it, which they give to you with their pleasure, is halal for you to take. Can one's husband or wife pay on others' behalf in their own will? In their own will meaning the bequest one leaves behind when they die. In their own others' behalf, on their, like, from their own will. Okay. The answer is that the wife has her own obligation of distributing zakat. The man does not have tasarruf upon his own wife's mal. Okay, so the man cannot give zakat on behalf of the woman without her knowledge, without her permission. If she says that yes, you give this much amount, or the husband says to the wife that your total assets zakatable come to this price and I will give it from my pocket, and she says okay, then it's fine, that zakat will be valid. If the man gives the zakat without her knowing, then that zakat is invalid. He will have to reimburse her with that money and then maybe give it in zakat. The only time it will be fine is if a father pays the zakat without the permission of his children, because the father, if the children are still in his kifalat, Yani they are still in his guardianship and they have become baligh and zakat is obligatory, and they have assets that are zakatable, and they've reached the nisab, etc., then that father has the right of tasarruf over the child's assets, and therefore his given zakat will be valid, but not for the wife. Okay. Similarly, a son giving it for the father, it will not be accepted. The father's permission will have to be sought first. On stocks, as I've said, that it is an investment which we have, our ulama kiram have regarded as forbidden. So if you're talking about stocks as in the share market, yeah. So that I've answered this before, that the whole value, once you have cashed in and taken your money out, you've taken your investment back, you will pay zakat on all of it, and you will backdate it if you haven't paid before. Does interest received from bank savings be classified as haram assets? No, riba is haram in Islam, not interest. Okay, interest is at times riba, but not always. For example, any dealings between a Muslim and a non-Muslim who is not living in a Muslim governed land, that non-Muslim's dealings between with the Muslim is in interest is not called riba. And such as money received in banks as from your savings account in the UK and America, the banks that are owned by non-Muslims, that interest is not riba. Riba is completely forbidden. It is one of the major sins. But this interest is not that riba, and it is halal, and it is zakatable. Do we have to pay zakat on rented house or a rented car? I meant that I am the owner of that property, but right now I have rented it to a person for a year, so will I? Okay, this I mentioned this at the beginning of today's session. There is one thing called amwalut tijara, and there is another called asbabut tijara. If you are renting properties out, or tools or furniture, anything else, cars, then these things are your asbabut tijara. They are your means of trade. What you are trading is benefit, nafa, in exchange of money or whatever else you are taking from them. And the house, your house, the properties, the tools, they are the asbab of tijara. They are regarded as the hajate asliya. They are the initial needs of your trade. They are not zakatable. Hajate asliya are not zakatable. Okay, so you as a landlord would give zakat on your rental income if you have anything saved from it at the end of your year. Will zakat be valid on shareholders of a company if the company's assets are liquidized? Yeah, so if the company's assets are liquidized, then in that case, would the shareholders receive their shares? What do we mean by liquidized? Yani it's all cashed, sold off? Okay, the zakat is only valid on things you have in your ownership. And if there is a company and there are shareholders of the company, if the company is there, it has assets and there is finances there, then the shareholders will have to give their zakat based on their share. If there is nothing left from the company, there's no finances left, there's no assets left, then they will not have to give zakat on it. If everything has been sold, the company has been closed down, and all of them have taken their own shares, then they will give zakat on what they have. Okay, they all will individually give zakat on what they have in their ownership. Okay. No more questions?
There's a question about what books can you recommend?
What books can I recommend for zakat? Yeah, if Qanun-e-Shariat, Bahar-e-Shariat, these are books that I would recommend. They are available in English. But the best form of knowledge for these type of things is the local scholars. Use your local ulama, as long as they are ulama. Unfortunately, today we do have a lot of neem mullah, and I don't like saying this because I have a lot of love for ulama kiram. I have a lot of respect, and I have from my heart really enjoy the company of the ulama kiram. But unfortunately, due to the shortage of scholars, people have resorted to half scholars, and these half scholars unfortunately do give a lot of misleading information out due to their incomplete understanding of matters. So find a complete scholar, one that is certified from a reputable institute, and consult them. Okay. When you need to pay zakat on your investment is depending on your year. So the first time you as an individual became sahib-e-nisab, from that date, the following year, according to the Islamic lunar calendar, when your year ends, you will look at what you have in terms of assets. Okay, so whether it's just one day before that, you became the owner of the shares of a company that were valued at thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds, you have to pay zakat on it, because that's the end of your year. That's your annual date that you pay zakat on. You will take all your assets into account on that day and pay zakat on all of them. Okay, on the net worth of your zakat assets, zakatable assets. Khalas? Okay, seeming as you guys have used my time for your questions, I will now use some of your time for my continuation of the course. So we have been through 4 sections, section 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the next section is the beneficiary. Okay, so we'll just start this. We do have some time. So this is just a recollection of the verse of the Quran we went through in the first section. So the beneficiaries in the Quran have been explicitly mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so take a moment, just have a look at that verse, note it down, the reference, Surah Tawbah, which is Surah number 9, verse number 60. So there are 8 beneficiaries of zakat. And if I just go back one step, and you can see there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end has said, Faridatan min Allah, yani it's as a decree by Allah, yani these 8 are the ones that will receive zakat. Wallahu alimun hakim, and Allah is all knowing and all wise. And that tells us that it is not up to us who is deserving or eligible to be a beneficiary of zakat. Allah has decreed and ordained who is eligible. These are the 8 categories for those who are eligible to take zakat, to receive the zakat. Okay, I'm just giving you a moment to have a look at them, and we'll look at each one in a bit more detail. So the first one is the poor, the faqir. And if you recollect the verse again, it says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ. Okay, wal masakin. They are the first 2 mentioned. If you look there, it says لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. And that's what I mean here. The poor and destitute are the most rightful beneficiaries of zakat, which is indicated in the Quran. And when I say indicated in the Quran, I mean by that they are the first 2 that Allah mentioned. And as they are the first 2 that Allah has mentioned, that indicates that they are the most rightful beneficiaries of zakat. And the ulama kiram have said that they are the essential and the original beneficiaries of zakat. Okay, what is the difference between a faqir and a miskin? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said lil fuqara'i wal masakin. There are some ulama kiram who believe that they are both the same, fuqara and masakin. and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning them, both words for the same individual, it expresses or implies the importance of giving zakat to the poor and destitute. However, the favorable opinion in the Hanafi madhab is as follows. A faqir is someone whose net worth of assets, apart from the initial needs, do not reach the nisab. Okay, and this is a bit difficult for everybody to understand. So if you just pay attention to this for a moment, it says a faqir is someone whose net worth of assets, apart from the initial needs, yani the hajat asliya, do not reach the nisab. And I've explained that further here. It says the net worth refers to the excess of zakatable and non-zakatable assets, apart from the initial needs over all blockers. Okay, what I mean by this is someone has a car. Someone has 3 cars. 2 of them the person uses. The third car the person does not use. It's just sitting there. It's not from the hajat asliya because he has no use of that car. But it's not zakatable because it's not there for selling. He didn't buy it to sell. It's not, doesn't fulfill the conditions of of numu, growable. So then, is that person a faqir if the person does not own any assets that are zakatable that reach the nisab? The answer is the person is not a faqir because the person does have non-zakatable assets, which is that one car which is apart from the initial need. It's not a hajat asliya. So although that car is not zakatable, it is still apart from the initial needs. It is separate to the initial needs. Therefore, he will be told that you need to sell that car and then you will yourself become malik nisab. So such a person is not a faqir, such a person is a faqir. Similarly, a person who is not an alim, but he has the books of the ulama kiram, he doesn't even know the Arabic language and he's got all these Arabic books of Hanafi fiqh and tafsir and hadith, etc. And they are worth £20,000. In terms of his own zakatable assets, he doesn't have anything that reaches the nisab. Zakat is not farz upon him. It's not obligatory upon him. However, at the same time, the person cannot take zakat. The reason why they can't take zakat is because they are still ghani. And that means they have non-zakatable assets that are apart from their initial needs, which they can sell and become ghani, have enough money. Okay, so that's what we're saying. So a faqir is someone who doesn't have anything that he can maybe sell apart from his initial needs that will then make him a malik nisab. Okay, then it says if an alim is poor, yani if you have faqir, fuqara that you've got to give zakat to, and amongst the fuqara there is an alim, then it is more virtuous to give to him than to a non-alim. So if you have zakat to give, you should first look at the ulama if there are fuqara amongst them. And in the books of fiqh, it also mentions that when giving to an alim of the deen, if he is eligible to be a beneficiary of zakat, then you must ensure you uphold the respect and honor, and you should give as though he is doing you a favor. You should give as though a small person is giving to a greater person. And otherwise, if there is any form of disrespect or any form of demeaning or despise or hate, then that would be destruction of oneself, because any form of disrespect towards ulama is destroying the iman of the individual. Thereafter it says it is impermissible for the poor to beg, because someone who has food and clothing is not permitted to beg. And the reason why I've mentioned that is the word faqir means someone who does have food and drink. Okay, and for them it is not permissible to beg and to ask for money or food, etc. They can't ask for things, they can't beg. It's not permitted to beg. That's the faqir. As for the miskin, the destitute, a poor and destitute, again, I've mentioned that first line again, the poor and destitute are the most rightful beneficiaries of zakat, which is indicated in the Quran. As for who a miskin person is, it says a destitute is someone who has nothing, up to the extent that he or she is dependent on begging for clothing and food. Yani they are muhtaj in clothing and food. They have to beg. They have no other option. It is permissible for the destitute to beg. So a miskin is someone for whom it is permissible to beg. And a faqir is someone who is not permitted to beg. The third one mentioned in the Quran, al-amilina alayha, the collector. And the collector is the person, organization, or company appointed by the Muslim government to collect the zakat from the people. Okay, so if there is a Muslim government, the Hakim-e-Islam, he, the Badshah of Islam, the Sultan of Islam, he appoints a specific individual or a company to go out and collect the zakat from the people, then they are rightful of taking zakat as well. How much can they take? It says here the Muslim ruler or government is not permitted to give the collector more than half of that which the collector has collected. Okay, so more than 50% cannot be given to the collector. Nowadays, there are no collectors. These ulama kiram or charity workers and masajid who do cater for delivering or distributing people's zakat, they are not collectors. They are not amilin. And you must not give to anyone who believes it is permissible to take 50% of your zakat money. Unfortunately, there was a fatwa a few years ago given that in today's day and age where there is no Muslim government, those people who do collect the zakat from the people and take it to the poor, they have the right to take 50% of that money. And if you know of any individual that does that, then do not give your zakat to such an individual. It is not permissible. This is only the right that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had. He appointed someone and he had the right to give it to them. And in his representation, the Hakim-e-Islam has that right. No other Tom, Ali, and Zaid has that right. Non-Muslims, are we okay to carry on? Non-Muslims, and this is the Mu'allafatul Qulub. This refers to specific non-Muslims in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose hearts were to be inclined towards Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted the distribution of zakat to certain non-Muslims whose hearts needed to be softened or inclined towards Islam. And these were those that lived in the Muslim governed Medina Munawwara and outside Medina Munawwara, all of the Muslim governed land. But in the Khilafah of Sayyiduna Siddiq Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala an, an agreement of the Sahaba Kiram, yani the ijma of the Sahaba, stated that non-Muslims are no longer beneficiaries of zakat. Okay, there is no need to soften or incline the hearts of the non-Muslims towards Islam through the money, through the zakat, through zakat. Okay, so non-Muslims, mu'allafatul qulub, non-Muslims are not permitted. We are not permitted to distribute zakat to non-Muslims. The rule is any wajib sadaqah, any fard sadaqah, it is completely haram to give to non-Muslims. To non-Muslims, one may give voluntary sadaqah, voluntary charity, if it is with the intention of softening the hearts towards Islam and inclining them towards Islam, or even if it is preventing their evil towards Islam, then that is rewardable. Okay, in the Quran, it also mentions wafir riqab, and wafir riqab means in order to help a slave get free, for supporting the freedom of a slave. And Islam recognized that it was customary for the people to trade in slaves and use slaves, And at the same time, Islam recognized, not only recognized, but it was a revolution that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did in freeing slaves. And throughout Islam, there are so many ways of freeing slaves, so many compensations of sins or to free slaves, and there is so much reward mentioned to encourage people to free slaves. And this is one of them. And this specifically refers to a mukatab, because we do not have the right to free the slave of another person. Well, in that time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're going back in time. So this is specifically for the time when there were slaves. But what is a mukatab? A mukatab is a slave who has a contract of manumission with his master. Okay, manumission means an agreement to become free. So this is an agreement for purchasing freedom between the slave and the master. So if a master has said to his slave that if you make a payment of this amount, then you are free, and he lets him go to earn that amount. So such a slave is known as a mukatab in Islam, in Arabic. And if there is a mukatab, then the Islamic law permits that type of person to be a beneficiary of zakat, up to the extent that if he does not accumulate enough money to purchase his freedom or her freedom, but took zakat from people, then that zakat will still be valid, even if he cannot or she cannot make that payment. But that's not really relevant to us anymore. Debtor, gharim, is the one who is in debt. This person is only eligible to take zakat if he or she fits in the category of poor. Okay, so remember, if someone has an asset which is not from the hajat asliya, which they can sell and become free from debt, then they can't take zakat. Zakat can only be taken by a person who is in debt if their net worth does not reach nisab. Okay, from zakatable and non-zakatable assets. And the last two, fi sabilillah and ibn sabil, in the path of Allah. These are individuals in the path of Allah but cannot afford it. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and what we'll do is we'll stop here, and inshallah we shall carry on tomorrow, because I've just realized that we have gone over the appointed time, and I don't want to put anybody else in difficulty. So inshallah from tomorrow, we will inshallah continue from the middle of the section of beneficiary, and we will start from the path of Allah inshallah. So jazakumullahu khaira. Thank you very much for attending and listening. If there is any immediate question on what we've covered now, okay, or we'll answer them at the end of the section of beneficiary inshallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward us all with beneficial knowledge and protect us from knowledge that is not beneficial. Jazakumullahu khaira. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.